Welcome back to PPCM's Painful Truth. Today's guest, Nicole Taylor.
Hi, Nicole. Hi. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks.
The great thing is I don't know anything about you. So,
Okay.
why don't you tell me where you're from and how did you learn about peripartum cardiomyopathy, PPCM?
Okay. So I'm Nicole Taylor and I am from Lima, Ohio. So peripartum cardiomyopathy was an obsolete word in my language prior to getting pregnant. I had never heard of it. And then during my pregnancy, obviously, and after delivery, it was something that being diagnosed, and trying to
When were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed in 2012, February 2nd of 2012.
Okay. And were you diagnosed during your pregnancy or already at a life threat?
I was already in a life threat. It was after pregnancy.
Okay. How much further after pregnancy were your symptoms just kind of getting exasperated to the point where you were at a threat?
So I would say that my symptoms actually started occurring during pregnancy.
Okay.
And they were kind of looked over around 27 weeks of pregnancy. At 34 weeks of pregnancy is when my blood pressure had began to rise, and they had looked into preeclampsia. So I was induced at 34 weeks via C-section.
You were induced, meaning like you didn't have your full term of you were induced, which means did they have a C-section? Did you have a C-section?
I did have a C-section. And I had to be induced because of the preeclampsia being severe and turning into HELLP syndrome at that point.
Okay. Okay. And where were you diagnosed? What was the hospital or what was the name of the state?
The state was Ohio and the hospital is St. Rita's Medical Center.
Okay. So they're the ones at the ER that diagnosed you.
Correct.
Okay. So when they diagnosed you, do you know how it was that what tool did they give you? The BNP? Did they find it through your echo? What was it that got them to diagnose you with what diagnosis kit?
When they were looking at the cardiomyopathy, is that what you're asking? Or the preeclampsia?
Like because I was considered, both as well, preeclampsia as well as peripartum cardiomyopathy, PPCM. I was never diagnosed at all until after I had my times of death called, literally. So, so basically, there's really not much of when you are diagnosed, it's like, okay, for me, I wasn't even diagnosed in the hospital where I delivered, even though I kept going back to them saying that I wasn't feeling well. I ended up in Arizona. So like, I always think it's very important to say, who are the people that saved you? Who are the people that knew? And it always comes back to that the ER is what is diagnosing women, but I'm trying to figure out what diagnosis tool, because the NT-proBNP test is something that women should have during pregnancy.
Correct.
And as well as knowing if the heart is enlarging or weakening from,
Mhm.
the placenta growth, and how that
Mhm.
growth is, you know, kind of like, is it causing complications, and what the diagnosis to have to treat. So like like I always want to know, like, how were they able to diagnose you? Through a EKG, through your BNP? Like,
Mhm.
what was the tool or the kit or the instrument that
So
that
I was sent home after I delivered and returned back because of the blood pressure and the shortness of breath.
yeah.
At that time, I was readmitted into labor and delivery.
Okay.
Um, in the middle of the night is when my oxygen levels were dropping. Um, and they had brought up an x-ray machine and saw that there was fluid in my lungs, which
Uh-huh.
at that point the nurses sent me to ICU,
Mm.
and then ICU had did the echo, and that's where they had learned that this is what was going on.
And you were in fact in heart failure.
Correct.
So how did they treat you with the Lasix, magnesium drip?
So I originally, so prior to giving birth, they had put me on the magnesium drip. When I was readmitted, I had um, said that I wasn't going to go back on the magnesium because there was so much other things that I thought that could be done at that point, not being pregnant. Like, let's get some medicine going. So once I got to the ICU, they started doing Lasix and pulling fluid off. They had learned that my ejection fraction was at 18%. And then I had said, like, I'm okay with going back on the mag drip
Mm-hmm.
now that we know what we're dealing with.
Right.
And honestly, I feel like if they would have put me on the mag prior to knowing what was going on, I don't know that my body would have been able to sustain being in that fog of the mag
That makes
and
sense. Yeah.
and being able to breathe.
Right. Yeah, that it's very definitely. I mean, with anatomy and like there, and now with like our medicines that are provided, like the Corey beta blocker, the
Mhm.
things of that, we are lucky to have.
Absolutely.
Um
For sure.
and if this was applied during pregnancy, because it is available to us, it's
Mhm.
just that we're
Mhm.
not diagnosed to have the treatment.
Mhm.
So, that's why we're talking about this, because I'm out there, I hear everybody, I hear all women talk about, their this experience, including like with what I went through. And it's like, for some reason, it's been 5 years
Mm.
that I've been raging,
Mm.
and nobody's been listening.
Mhm.
So that's why I just feel like, okay, well, it's not rare, it's just rarely diagnosed, and nothing's being done.
Yeah.
So we're just going to talk about it and see what
Mhm.
happens
For
moving
sure.
forward. Did you go back to your obstetrician and
So
say,
so my obstetrician had met me in the ICU room.
okay,
First words out of his mouth were, "You'll never be able to have children again," which to me was like, why would that be
talking
the
to that,
first thing
right?
that. And I said, my son's in the NICU, I'm in the ICU, like that's the last thing from my mind right now. And so I was still looking over the negligence. I was pretty foggy and not feeling well at that time still.
Yeah.
When I went back in for my post-op at 6 weeks, I had kind of complained, that the medicine that I was on was giving me some brain fog, and I just felt like I was like not myself and I'm tired. And he said, "Oh, well, you don't have to take those medicines anymore. Like, you're okay. You're past the clearance. Like, you don't need them anymore. So at that point, I had realized, like, okay, like, I need to see like somebody that's a specialist, or somebody that's, a little bit more involved, somebody that will listen.
Right. And that's kind of like where, well, first off, I'm very sorry that was like so
dismissed.
Lack of, his somewhere along his medical practice, he's lost his humanity.
For sure.
Because if that was his daughter that was sitting there, or his granddaughter, or his wife, I think that it would be a completely different conversation that could have been saved much later, as well as, how does he know? Every pregnancy is different, and that a placenta growth is completely, one pregnancy has nothing to do with another pregnancy. And if you have the right heart team and the right clearance, I mean, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, but I've talked to so many women that continue having normal pregnancies that are not PPCM after their PPCM. And then they think, gosh, like, what if I would have listened to that doctor? And, doctors have opinions, and their opinion is definitely not, the end of end all, which is why you always have a second, a third, a fourth,
Absolutely.
a fifth opinion.
Absolutely.
So his opinion was extremely, removed from, a lack of just compassion. And, my parents always said, may they rest in peace, but when they were alive, they always said, Lindsay, a good doctor is a doctor who cares. And he was careless with his words. He didn't really care what you were going through at that moment. And for him to have the audacity to say that, when he should have said, I'm so sorry I missed this while you were pregnant. And from now on, I'm going to be more alert because I've learned from this, and I'm terribly sorry. And, look maternal mortality in the face, and own as a medical professional that, there are allowed, I mean, obviously mistakes because medicine's practice, but once you learn, it's like, so another, again, careless to not implement it. And it was careless of him to come and have that approach and not use the approach on what could actually benefit, as opposed to, tearing down a hard situation and make it even more difficult. So fuck him on that.
Right. And another thing,
big fuck you, who I don't know what his name is. What's his name?
Dr. Sugar, Dr. William Sugar.
Well, Sugar Doctor, I hope nobody in Ohio who's pregnant.
He retired, thank God, at the end of the last year. And I'm like, good. They had this big write up about him in the paper. Good. And like, how he delivered all of these babies. And I had actually commented, like, like, he may have delivered X amount of babies healthy.
Yeah, like a factory.
But, talk to some of these moms. You know what I mean? Like, there's other stories out there. And I'm at my 2-week post-op appointment where he checked my C-section. I had revisited that comment, and I said, when he came in, he greeted me. He was always very friendly and bubbly. I mean, he drew you in. And he said, how you doing? Da, 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 da. And I said, how many patients have you had that have had my same diagnosis to go on and to have more children? And he said, well, you can keep having babies. Like, that's just job security. And I said, but how many patients have you had that have successfully went on to have children after this diagnosis? And like, I could see the look on his face that he didn't even know he had no idea who I even was. And at that point, he spun in his chair and he opened up my chart, and he turned around and he said, yeah, I apologize. And I'm a hairstylist, and I always say, you know, as a hairstylist, if somebody came in with green hair, which is so minuscule compared to somebody's life, and
Yeah.
I had the chance to make their hair like better and them feel
Beautiful.
better
Yeah.
about themselves, like I wouldn't forget their face. Like those things leave imprints on us. And like when you're dealing with somebody's life, like how
Lives. It's not you
Yes.
had a baby inside of you, and there are many that, you know, unfortunately,
Yes.
I've heard very sad stories that, you
Yeah.
know, it's not just the mommy, it's the baby as well. And, you know, it's very concerning of the unwillingness. And I too, at Cedars-Sinai, Dr. Allison Canavan, I don't even know if I'm saying her name right, in East Tower. I did go to both East and West Tower. I saw every doctor, but, you know, once educated after the fact, after I had my times of death called, with a deadly defibrillator implant inside of me, she kept looking at the computer and going like, do, 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 where I had to literally say, I said, I am right in front of you.
Right.
She's like, oh, well, you know, your chart says that you are perfectly healthy. And I said, okay, well, my experience where I was times of death called, pronounced dead over 30 minutes, each cardiac death in a hyperthermia coma, being frozen where it took them 12 days to thaw me out, says otherwise. You know, I mean, it's like, I don't care what your chart says. I don't care what your medical record says. The medical records that were provided to me was a lie. It wasn't even my, like literally, I was looking at it, I was like, this is not my, I don't know whose medical records this is, but this isn't mine. And then the high risk management shut the computer down and literally had my husband and I walk right out of that office, almost like with security, basically, because we wanted the medical records that was in that computer at that meeting, because that was me. What we had wasn't. And then I still never got the right medical records. So, which is also why I started a docuseries, because of the woman Leah, who just died after childbirth there this past November 21st, 2021, which is why I started this docuseries, is because they're not listening. They weren't listening, but it's the unwillingness after, you know, there has to be, it's not like we're trying to blame anybody,
Right.
but there's got to be some sort of responsibility of taking and saying, oh, wow, you know, I wonder how many of you I don't know about. Because if I didn't go back and tell her that I died, she would have never known. And what she did to me is made me feel like it was my fault. The other woman who actually delivered my baby, she said that I just got the bad luck of the draw. And I'm like, yeah, because I didn't have medical professionals and birthing doctors that had any PPCM awareness.
Right.
Or
we live in the United
BNP.
States. Yeah, absolutely.
In the United States, we have the highest death rate for maternal mortality because we don't have zero diagnosis.
Yes.
At all until there's a life threat in the ER. When there's, I've heard others in other countries, they are being diagnosed.
It's
during pregnancy, but the United States of America women are not. It's at this point, you know, I don't think any big association that's involved with the heart could even play catch up at this point. Women are starting to really step up. Social media is really starting to come out, you know, and say, you know, why hasn't this been educated? Education is free. Like knowledge and training is like, yeah, you can pay for the education, but it's not even in the training books at the ACOG. It's not the doulas, the midwives, the birth keepers, where they get their training information. I even ask each and every single one of them that I interview, and I said, there's not even a little line, not even a blurb, not even at the bottom, like when you're buying something like a cute bathing suit, and then all of a sudden you get that reoccurring, like, you know, there's nothing like a thin line that you might miss. Nope.
It's really unbelievable. I was lucky enough. We live 3 hours from the Cleveland Clinic main campus. And after dealing with the runaround here and him telling me to go off my medication, I was lucky enough, and I would have to look and see what her name is now, but I was lucky enough to see a heart specialist in the Cleveland Clinic who's actually wrote some medical terminology on the diagnosis. And went in, continued to share my story with her. She had asked me about the medication and what medication I was on. And I said, at this point, my OB said, I didn't need it. And she was like, you absolutely need this medication. Like, your chance of morbidity is 80% greater.
Right.
If you do not take this medicine at least up until a year after your episode. She was like, you are still considered in congestive heart failure. She was like, you're not out of the woods.
Yeah. I kind of, dropped the ball on advocating for myself on that. I ended up having the defibrillator removed, but I was told that too, but I was already post a year out, which is why like I do feel when I do relapse. And it's interesting that I've learned something talking to other people. So, and this is something that now I'm aware of. And it's interesting when you're aware of something, how you can prevent it, So relapse is memory. Like our heart is our heart is one big muscle. And when we work out, we have muscle memory, right?
Right.
So our body has a tendency of remembering around the time when we've either given birth, at that time when we were experiencing PPCM, or around the time of the life threat. Our body produces, which I've noticed, more fluid, and it has memory. And that's when relapse happens, around the times of the event that happened, even if it was 5 years ago. So I've done the docuseries. I don't know if you've watched it, any of it. I'm on YouTube.
I have.
But I started in November. So you see me slowly losing the weight because of my Lasix. So here I'm going to the gym and working out, and I'm not losing. I'm just not losing the weight like I should be. So then I started, when I started to learn about the relapse, I said, well, then my body's producing fluid. So I started taking my Lasix, my every day. And just, for my Lasix, I mean, it's about, I want to say 5 to 8 pounds a week that I lose, that is just fluid. It's not fat, it's fluid.
Right.
So, even like 3 weeks ago, you see me in the video, and I was so swollen. I made sure, I was like, okay, I'm not going to miss a day. I'm not going to miss a day. And I'm not going to have any salt whatsoever. Nothing, not an olive, nothing. And, I now can fit in a size 2 dress that is hanging up, because I'm going to be in the pageant on June 2nd to give women a voice. So I'm walking the steps, but like, I couldn't believe it. So these interviews that I'm doing to help, just to give justice for others and to prove that this disease is real and that women in America are suffering. I learned that little things that I think other people could also apply and learn, that around the time of relapse of when you think that you can feel it. You can feel it. You feel like you feel more heavy. You feel a little bit more shortness of breath, either, for me, I was getting, my blood pressure was going so low. Like I was doing dishes and when I'd walk, I wouldn't feel like I was walking. I felt like I was floating. Like I felt like I could just drop. And then I would take a nap And I would say, I would apologize because, you know, I have a 5-year-old, and I would say to my husband, I'm so sorry. Like you couldn't even like pay me to get up, you know, because I was like,
Yeah.
physically, I just can't move. So then I
Mm-hmm.
realized, okay, well, the fluid is suffocating my heart. So
Mm-hmm.
I took my Lasix,
Mm-hmm.
and now you watch the docu series, and you literally, you see me again. You see my face again. You
Mm-hmm.
see, like, you know, me coming back to like a little bit of me, and the breathing is like so much better. I feel
Yeah.
better. And I think people, you know, with the modern medicine that we have, you know, why suffer if we don't need to? You
Right.
know, if we have the
Absolutely.
treatment, then
Mm-hmm.
why stop?
And a simple blood test. That's
The NT-proBNP test is
yes.
$15.
Right.
And like the medical community is asking nonprofits for, like, you know, money to pay for the BNP. It's like, it's $15 out of pocket. Like, what do you
Mm-hmm.
mean $15 out of, like,
Right.
it doesn't make sense, you know. If we do pay for that for women, if they can't
Mm-hmm.
afford it, we do,
Mm-hmm.
you know, figure out alternatives during, you know, delivery and labor, and having them transferred if there's, you know, a release, discharge after discharge after discharge. You know, we set them up where they go and they're not going to be discharged, they're actually going to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like
Yeah.
there's a lot of little things behind the scenes that, you know, nobody doesn't really see, and I don't really talk about because it's nobody's business,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so stressful. You know, this disease is very challenging. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the biggest challenge is for people to actually listen and like comment, respond, participate, support, even if it's, you know, lives are priceless. It's not at
Mm-hmm.
all about, you know, the funding helps save lives, but really what saves the lives is the education and just listening, you
And
know.
I think too that, you know, as women, you know, we can sympathize with each other during pregnancy with things that we know, the morning sickness, the, you know, the fatigue and things like that. And
Yes.
then when there's something taboo that, I mean, I don't know anyone personally that has ever had this diagnosis. So like, if there's nobody ever to like discuss this or to say like, oh my gosh, like, you know, have you kind of looked into like your heart? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there
Yeah, but
is,
the thing is that there's it's interesting that you say that there's not really anybody that you can relate to, but they don't even know. They were never diagnosed. They could have had it and not know
yeah,
it, you
that's,
know.
yeah.
And there is a woman that I interviewed. She was not diagnosed until 4 years after.
Hmm.
And she said, I had my kid 4 years. It sat dormant.
Hmm.
So unless there's real diagnosis and you know your BNP number, your blood test, and you know you're on top of your follow-ups as women, as we should, just like we do for cancer, just like as we get our mammograms, you know, for our breasts, you know, like there are things that we need to do that are just awareness and follow-up so we can prevent it. Well, our blood can prevent this disease, and so it's not applied, and just, you know, it's sad that young girls, you know, we don't know to ask for it, young women, and the doctors don't provide it, and when you ask them, some of them refuse. So, you know, it's not really fair, acceptable to continue the way
Right.
that this has been going.
For
And
sure.
I hope in our era, you know, we can create this change, you know, for all women's maternal mortality, heart health.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time today in educating us on your experience through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for letting me.
I could definitely relate. And I'm sorry, I have a golden retriever puppy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a good
Little,
boy.
yeah, we have golden doodles, so they're
Aww.
good little puppies for sure.
Yeah, he's my rescue love. I
Aww.
adore him. He keeps me going, my little trainer.
Aww.
But
Aww.
I really appreciate your, your time today because,
Yeah, I
you know,
appreciate it, you know, you bringing like putting it out there. Like it it's very commendable for somebody to step up and use the platform because, you know, I've always said, like, I just wish, you know, my voice could be heard. You know what I mean? Like just
absolutely.
sharing. And I think that that's the biggest way of just putting it on blast and letting it be known.
Yeah, and I took longer than I should, to be honest with you, but I also, well, COVID hit, but
Yeah.
then right after my heart surgery, 4 months after my mother passed, and then 18 months later my father passed, and then COVID hit. So it was like I needed to grieve and go through
Absolutely.
that.
Hmm.
Even today, I've been working on top TV shows and
Mm.
movies for over 18 years,
Mm.
with the same managers and other producers that I've worked together for over 18, 20 years. And, I'm available, but I told, this HBO producer that, I can't be on set. And, he offered me good money. I said,
Mhm.
all proceeds would go to the nonprofit, but he can utilize me in a different way. We're going to work
Mm.
together. But I've literally been turning down production jobs
Mm.
to dedicate my time to get this out there. And I'm not being paid for this. I'm actually, if anything, still giving. So
Mhm.
I'm hoping that, in return, the universe will, you know, like literally like
Circle
provide
back.
what I'm trying to
Mhm.
accomplish here so then we can move on with our lives again, because I can't sleep at night knowing
Yeah.
that the girl next door has no idea
Mm.
of something that I know that can prevent
Yeah.
our grandchildren and at
Right.
least their generation,
For
you
sure. For
know,
sure.
because our children are already born.
Yeah.
It's our grandchildren that we're looking out for.
Yes.
So
That's
we
exactly
still
right.
we still have a little time,
We
a
do.
little bit, um, depending on how the world reacts. But it seems as if not many are listening. So
Yeah.
hopefully, you know, getting this out there, the podcast will be out on iHeartRadio, Spotify, um, everywhere, and we're gonna get this out there as
Just
much as
just
possible.
yeah, just keep moving forward.
Absolutely.
It definitely will circle back.
I believe
Things like
that.
I
I
really do.
I believe, you put it out there, you build it, they will come. At this point, it hasn't been really, everyone kept saying, your approach isn't right. Your approach isn't right. And I'm thinking,
Mm.
how many different approaches can I have in 5
Mm.
years to try to
Mhm.
educate the wheelhouse of pregnancy and the birth
Mhm.
workers, and nothing's connecting, and women are screaming from the rooftops. And I feel
Mm.
like most of all, we just wanted justice and being heard, our
Yes.
story, because
Yeah,
we lived.
for sure.
So we're speaking literally on behalf of, you know women who have suffered and died and who
Mm.
can't literally speak up
Yep.
because they don't even know what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
They just gave, like you, I mean, 2012, I mean, I had my cardiac death 2016. So 4 years later, and there still
Mhm.
has been zero change
Yeah.
in 30 5 years, 2 years, 1 year.
Right.
So we'll start with that moving forward, that within between now 2022, from the time that this docu-series
Mhm.
and all of the media that we're putting out there for this platform, how long will it take?
Mm.
That's what goes always in the back of my mind. How long will it connect where the
Mhm.
wires will just
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
and then all will be right in the world. So
Soon. Soon. It will definitely get there.
I
For sure.
believe, or I wouldn't be putting my time in. I honestly, I wouldn't, you know, I have, you know, family and everything. Like I
Yeah.
have to continue on with my life, but I can't until there is justice. And
Mhm.
I'm making it work somehow. I'm just doing it somehow, making it work.
Yeah.
Because nobody's really saying what should be said, because they're
Mhm.
either too scared or they're worried
Right.
about what this one's going to think of you or that one's going to think of you. The thing is that not everybody's going to like me, not everyone's, and that's
Mm.
okay. And some people are going to think, you know, I talk where I maybe out of place or something, or say something that I shouldn't, but I'm really just transparent. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to like sugarcoat anything. I'm just trying to be as honest and real as possible, defending the women and backing up this disease, because
Mhm.
there's no other disease like it.
Right.
It's its own disease,
Right.
and it doesn't have a voice.
Yeah.
So I apologize, who's ever listening, if I ever insult anybody, because, you know, I get feedback and it's like, I'm like, well, maybe I'm a little bit of like a Sarah Silverman in a sense sometimes, like where I say some things, but I do have a lot of anger still and
Yeah.
frustrations like you know, I
It's
mean,
very
there's
raw.
very raw. I'm an open
Mhm.
wound even at
Mhm.
5 years later.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, it's like probably like you know, it's like
Mhm.
there's some things that just can't ever close. And
Yeah.
it comes from a place of where there needs to be respect. And I think that's
Mhm.
what lacks for
Yeah.
women in this disease, as
Absolutely.
women surviving maternal mortality and people just blowing it off even after the fact is what,
Mhm.
you know, hurts like to the core,
Yeah.
you know. And we're all, I mean, all women are, whether you have PPCM or not, I mean, we're all very unique and special, but there's something really special with survivors that still persevere and want to share their story.
Mhm.
And, you know, sharing it relives the nightmare.
Mhm.
And it's, that's why I kept saying, God, I need a megaphone, because I keep over and over rewind and play. And if it's out there once, I could just copy and paste the link and say, here,
Yeah. Right. Right. If it were that easy.
listen, and then we'll talk later.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for your time today. And
Yes. Thank you.
is there anything that you would like to share that you think that adds an important factor to this piece of the PPCM puzzle? Or
I think my biggest thing is just listen to your body. Like, don't make, like, when you know something is wrong, like you were saying, like I can feel the fluids, or I can feel my blood pressure. Like, when something isn't right. And just because a doctor dismisses those feelings, like, I mean, I would start feeling like I was going crazy, or like I wasn't like strong. I'm like, oh man,
oh,
like, am I just like a
I'm
wuss?
so
Like, am I not good at doing pregnancy? You know what I mean?
I'm
And
so
like,
sorry. Hold on one second. Hold on.
no, you're fine.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We'll
No,
have
oh
to
my
like
gosh.
edit this.
No, you're
Um,
fine.
but yes, self-advocacy is unanimous. It doesn't matter where the woman is in the world.
Mhm.
Every time I always say, what is the last thing that you would want to say? It's always, you know, listen to your body,
Mhm.
as well as, you know, self-advocacy, advocate, get, you know, opinion after opinion, because that's all doctors are. They have their opinions, and then we can
Absolutely.
take it and say whatever, or find another one. And then the other thing is that, you know, our minds also tell us when we're not well. And sometimes our
Mhm.
heart may be perfect, but then it's the mental factor of this. And
Mhm.
so I do believe in medication. You know, I believe I wouldn't
For-
definitely not be where I am today, grieving with my parents, coming back
Mhm.
from cardiac death, having a baby, you know, moving. I wouldn't have the energy or the mental, but I believe, because I kept nourishing my brain and my
Mhm.
mental, you know, status, knowing that I can't do this on my own, that
Mhm.
I was literally falling. And I was the only one to pick myself up. After my mom died, I was paralyzed. And I realized that mental health can actually really heal the heart, or it can make the body sick.
Right.
So there is that balance scale between the brain and the heart. Just like our bodies tells us, you know, something's not right, and we can feel the fluid, we can feel the flutters in our heart, we can feel the pressure of the tightening of our chest. You know, at sometimes we can feel ourselves dizzy, but it's also knowing what to be aware of when the mind is saying, you know, I'm not well either. You know, because there's still there's fluid in there, and that fluid can cause dementia, you know, and you don't want to cause a disease by stressing it and putting that fluid into that certain area of that brain that could cause, you know, develop the disease. I mean, like,
For sure.
all the diseases are developed from our fluid, literally. So if we know this, now that we know this with the BNP, and we know this, then that's something that I feel is our forever self-advocacy, is always being up on that BNP awareness number.
For sure.
So yes. Well,
so yeah, it was very nice talking to you. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Same to you.
Yes.
And I'll keep you, I don't know, I see you updated. Are we even friends on Facebook? I don't know.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yep. I'm up there, and like I post, but it's like I don't know if I'm coming or going. So it's like,
for sure,
I added about 4,000 like survivors, I think, to try to do this. This series, because hopefully this continues, these conversations continue for the next, you know, years and years to come, until there's actual change. You know, we can't stop. People need to keep showing up. So if you know anybody in California that wants to do an in-person interview, that's something that we need. You know, I have, you know, 8, but there's way more than that in California. There has to be.
Yeah.
So I need to prove this. So people need to step up. I just don't know how to find them.
It will come. It will come. It will all fall together.
Yeah. So if you ever see anybody, California,
send them your way.
Yeah, or attach my name in that.
Will do.
So that way I can, you know, get their in-person interviews for the docuseries, because the docuseries is in person. The Zoom calls are podcasts.
Right. For sure.
It just has to be that way for media process.
Yeah.
And more content, different out there, different ways.
Yeah.
So,
cool, all right.
Well, have a lovely, lovely day.
Yes, you too.
And I will be seeing you soon.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us and listening to the PPCM Fund podcast. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. PPCM's Painful Truth is made possible through the generous support of donors like you. Help us spread the awareness by donating at ppcmfund.com, or click the link below to become a member through Ko-fi. Have a great day.